What's up everybody, Tyler here again. I am a real estate agent and owner here at Cafe Pruvia in Los Angeles. And on my channel, I share business tips and advice from my own experience in hopes that I can inspire some of you to go out and chase your dreams and goals. So today we're gonna be talking about how to make $1 million a year. Now, a benchmark income for a lot of people, especially young people, is to make 6 figures. But what does that look like? Because that's different for everyone. It can range from $100,000 to $999,000. So how do you actually get past that threshold to make that 7 or even 8-figure income? If you make over $400,000 a year, you are actually in the top 1% of earners in the United States. Now, please note that I am not talking about a business that does $1 million in sales a year. A business that does $1 million in sales, even with a good profit margin between 40 to 60%, the take home on that net would be about $350,000 to $500,000 a year. So I am talking about $1 million net in income after expenses and before taxes. Now, please note that I am not a millionaire myself, though it is one of my goals to make a 7-figure income by 30 on an annual basis. But I do know many people that actually make a 7 or even 8-figure income a year. So that ranges between $1 million up to $10 million plus per year. In talking to them, I came up with 3 pieces of advice that I think we can all learn from that will help push us in our businesses in order to eventually get to that 7-figure income level. So piece of advice number 1 is to build a strong foundation. Now, the 3 people that I talked to, they all made their money in completely different industries. Some of them made it in sales commission jobs, another was owning restaurants, another one was in e-commerce. So those are all completely different, and they were able to scale those differently through the years and time that they spent in those industries. But their overall point to me was to stick to that one industry and become so good at it that becomes a very high producing income for you that you can scale it to the high 6-figure income and eventually take it to the 7-figure level. One of the people that I talked to, I have known for a very long time. He actually started serving tables, and what he did is he saved a lot of that money. Eventually, he bought an inventory of items and he resold them online. Now, keep in mind, this is way before the Amazon boom and before everyone tried to do dropshipping or some kind of e-com business. He got in this business about 8 years ago. Through time, he was able to keep scaling that, and eventually his business was doing over $1 million in sales a year. After his expenses, he was taking home about $450,000. He then took that money and started a chain of restaurants, which now he owns over 9 restaurants total. And he still has his e-commerce business running smoothly every single day to supplement his daily income. So one commonality that they all had is they stuck to one industry and they worked hard at that one job. They became so good at it that they were able to scale their skill and eventually get to a very, very high producing income. Now, a lot of gurus will tell you online to have multiple streams of income, and you always see that picture or that meme that says every millionaire has 6 to 7 streams of income. Now, that may be true, but I can almost guarantee you that they all started with 1 or 2 as a foundation to eventually build enough income so they could invest in other assets that produce them more income on an annual basis. So the second piece of advice that they all gave me was to think long term. One of them said to think in years of 10 to even up to 20 years of where you want to be and be patient in that. So I think one of the biggest and hardest temptations that we have as humans is when we think about making a high income, we want to get there really fast and we want instant gratification, and we try to find some get rich quick scheme. Though you do have stories of people who made a lot of money very quickly through a stock purchase or through maybe some sort of e-com business that they scaled very quickly. Yes, those stories do happen. But on an overall basis, the people that we know that are millionaires, the average age of them is 65 years old. So what does that tell you? That means that they built it over a very, very long time. So Bill Gates, one of the richest men in the world, he famously said that a lot of people, they overestimate what they can do in 1 year and they underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And that's essentially the same exact advice that all 3 of these people gave me, that you need to think in longer terms and not try to find ways to get rich quick. Focus on your business, focus on your industry, become as much of an expert as you can, and keep excelling in that one job until you can reach a very, very high income and be seen as an expert within your industry. I think the overall lesson in that point is to be extremely patient and just keep working at it day by day, year by year, growing and scaling, and eventually within a 10 to 20 year period, you will see a massive amount of results that came from those small things you did on a daily basis and by being patient. And advice number 3 is to learn to leverage and diversify. So first, learning to expand that foundational business until you extract enough income that you can then buy more assets that produce you more passive income. For example, in real estate, you can buy a $500,000 property with only $100,000 of your own cash because the bank will actually allow you to borrow 80% of that if it's non-owner occupied. Over time, you can use leverage to eventually keep growing your portfolio until you have a big enough portfolio that pays you enough passive income that you can actually quit your day job. So for a real life example, if you own about $15 million in real estate, you own 35% equity, and you have that portfolio at about a 10% cap rate or a 10% annualized return, after your debt service, you will be left with about $1 million in income on your pre-tax cash flow. So even though the value of your portfolio is about $15 million, you would have an equity of about $5,250,000. So the bank is allowing you to borrow that extra remaining dollar amount in order for you to own that much real estate. So that's one source of leverage, using other people's money in order to grow your own assets and buying assets that you can then extract income from. Another piece of leverage that they talked about was learning to use other people's efforts in order to do the things that you physically could not do all by yourself. For example, owning something like a restaurant, it's actually impossible for you to do every single task by yourself. So having people that you can hire in order to mitigate those efforts, and eventually if you can scale that business so you can hire managers and general managers, then you just oversee the business as a whole and you don't have to be in there on the daily operations. So if you have a good business that does about a 40 to 60% profit margin, you would need about a gross income of $1.2 million a year. At a 60% expense rate, you're left with about $500,000. Now $500,000 is half to that 7-figure income level. Now you can leverage other people's efforts and open maybe a second location or find other ways to scale so that you can push your revenue, your net revenue, to $1 million a year. So understanding and learning to use other people's money and other people's time and efforts in order for you to not have to do all the physical work, and you can stretch your dollar as far as it can go. So that's what I have for today. These are 3 tips that I have learned from people who make 7 to 8 figure incomes. I hope you learned something. I know this wasn't super detailed and practical, but more about an overall bigger picture of how do you actually get to that 7-figure income level. I think for a lot of people, conceptualizing even to make $1 million a year is absolutely crazy. Which if you look at the statistics of it, it's a very small percentage of people who actually do hit a 7-figure income annually. But I think if you do take these things, and I'm pretty sure if you talk to almost any millionaire across the board, they will tell you something very similar. And I think the one that stuck out the most for me is learning to leverage other people's money and other people's efforts in order to grow my assets and grow my business. Real estate is obviously for me an industry that I understand the most. Knowing that I could actually purchase $1 million in assets of real estate and I would only have to put down about $250,000 of my own money is a huge upside. I can then rent out those properties and the tenants will then cover my mortgage and pay my expenses and hopefully make some profit on top of that. So I hope you guys learned something. And if you do want to learn a little bit more about real estate investment and how maybe you can leverage other people's money, whether it be the bank or your friends and family to syndicate a fund to buy property, you're more than welcome to comment below or contact me directly, and I'd be more than happy to show you a little bit about the basics of how to underwrite property and how to figure out what is a good and bad asset. So that's all I have for today. Please like and subscribe, and thank you so much for tuning in if you made it to the end of this video. Actually, on the next coming videos, I do plan on doing one where I break down how to look at an investment property and understand if it's a good or bad buy. I will break down the terminology to give you a basic understanding so that if you find a property, you should have a good idea of how to underwrite it so you know whether you should purchase it or not, or how to purchase that property correctly. So again, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all next week.